This is a lamb floating in a bag. No mother, no womb, and it lived like this for 28 days. This wasn't the first attempt or the 10th. This was experiment number 300, and they have perfected growing babies outside the body. In 2023, FDA held a meeting to discuss this testing on human babies. In part 1, I showed you why half of you won't have kids, and in this video, I am showing you what's being built to replace you. If you haven't seen the part 1, link is in the description below. Let me show you what happens next. This is the group that nobody talks about. People who's always wanting to have kids, who planned on having them, they just haven't had them yet. The eventually crowd. You know them by different names. DINKs, which is dual income, no kids. And this sounds like a lifestyle choice. I looked into it. 65% of them say they are planning to have kids. 37% people say they will have kids in next 5 years. They are not child-free by choice. They are child-later by necessity, waiting until they are ready. But here's the thing about eventually having kids. This strategy has an expiration date. I'm not going to sugarcoat this, but peak fertility is late 20s and early 30s. It starts dropping at 35, and at 40 you are half as fertile as you were at 25. A 25-year-old trying to get pregnant will have 18% chance per month versus a 40-year-old who will have 7%. You spend your 20s building stability, you spend your early 30s trying to find someone, and you finally feel ready at 35, 36 or 37. And the window is already closing in. So I wanted to know, how common is this actually? As per World Health Organization report in 2023, 1 in 6 people will experience infertility at some point at their life. In America, 42% have either gone through fertility treatment themselves or know someone close to them who is going through. So if you are watching this and thinking that this won't be me, statistically, there's a very good chance it will be, or it will be someone you really love and know. So what do people do when they realize eventually having kids might not work? There are 2 main options. 1, egg freezing. You freeze your eggs, try to buy yourself more times. 40,000 women did this last year, which is up by 40% from the year before. Companies like Apple and Meta offer it as part of their benefit now. This industry is projected to hit $30 billion by 2035. The second option is IVF. You are not buying time anymore, you're trying to make it happen right now. The cost per cycle can range from $15,000 to $30,000, and the average cycles needed to get pregnant is 2.5. So you are looking close to $50,000 of investment, and the success rates? Under 35, it is about 50%, and this number drops to half when you close to 40. And over 42, this number is 5%. So you wait because you can't afford kids, then you spend $50,000 trying to have them anyway, and it still might not work. There's this woman I want to tell you about, and her name is Bridget Adams. In 2014, she was on the cover of Bloomberg Business Week. She became the face of the whole movement. She started a blog, gave talks, and she was the proof that you could have it all. Just later, she froze 11 eggs in her late 30s, paid close to $20,000, and felt that she finally bought herself time. At 45, she decided that she was ready, and she unfroze all of the 11 eggs. None of them worked. She told the Washington Post that there's a huge marketing hype and overpromise. We are only seeing half the story. She finally had a child through a donor egg and a donor sperm, not her genetics and not the plan she had carved out for herself. So when biology won't cooperate, someone is going to try a different solution. And what I found next honestly scared me more than any of those numbers. Children's Hospital of Philadelphia has built something called Extend. It is an artificial womb system. This is a lamb floating in a synthetic amniotic fluid inside a bag, tubes connected to its umbilical cord, and machines keeping it alive. This lamb lived like this for 28 days. It grew, it developed, its organs matured, and brain developed normally. This was experiment number 300. In September 23, FDA held a public meeting specifically to discuss the testing of this technology on human babies. The lead researcher testified before this committee, and he said that we have now run over 300 lambs in the artificial womb system, and the runs are generally remarkably smooth. We have observed no acute irreversible events that threatens the survival. And then he goes on adding this, that we believe that our preclinical data supports feasibility and safety, and that it is adequate for consideration of a carefully designed clinical study. In simple words, he is asking for permission to test this technology on human babies, and the FDA is listening. But the US isn't the only country building this. In Netherlands, the European Union gave researchers close to 3 million euros to develop their own version. And then I found Israel. And this is where it gets to feel like we have crossed a line. In Weizmann Institute of Science, Professor Jacob Hanna and his team successfully grew mouse embryos in an artificial womb. And that's impressive. But it is not a breakthrough. In the same month, when FDA was meeting to discuss about artificial womb, his team announced that he had created synthetic human embryos. No sperm, no egg, and no womb. They took stem cells, reprogrammed them, and grew structures that look exactly like 14-day-old human embryos. No parents required. And then finally, there's China. They have developed an AI nanny system for monitoring embryos in artificial womb. It watches the embryos develop, it detects problem, adjusts nutrients and oxygen levels. It also alerts human technicians if something is not going according to the plan. But here's the quote that made me stop. An anonymous researcher at the Capital Institute of Pediatrics in Beijing told the South China Morning Post that I don't think technology would be a problem, but it could risk turning hospitals into factories that churn out babies, and no hospital would want to bear this responsibility. Think about it. Factories that churn out babies, and that's not me being dramatic. That's a Chinese researcher in a peer-reviewed publications saying the quiet part out loud. This is no longer science fiction. Now, I need to show you something, and I need to be very clear before I do. What you are about to see is not real. This is a concept video created by a filmmaker named Hashim. This doesn't exist today, and this is a vision of what could be the possibility in near future. Ectolife, 75 labs worldwide, 400 growth pods each, and 30,000 babies per year. Parents choose genetic traits through an app, monitor fetal development on their phones, and press a button when they are ready to deliver. Again, concept, vision, not reality. But Hashim said something in his interviews. He says that according to the experts I consulted, this danger-free, convenient alternative could become a reality soon, perhaps in the next 10 to 15 years, if governments lift ethical restrictions. So, now you have labs in 4 different countries building machines that don't need people to fall in love. They don't need anyone to sacrifice their career, and they don't need anyone to afford childcare. They also don't need 2 people to agree on timing. Machines will create babies. The same governments that fail to make having childcare affordable are now funding technology to make parents optional. Alright, let me tell you what I actually learned from all of this. I started this because I wanted to understand why everyone I know is exhausted, broke, single, or figuring out when to have kids. And I thought maybe we were just doing something wrong. So I spent time looking at the numbers. China, 21,000 kindergartens closed in 1 year. South Korea, 0.72 children per woman. Half of humanity is below replacement rate, and $150 billion spent on pets. The next $25 billion is spent on fertility treatment that fails most of the time. And now labs in 4 countries are building machines to grow babies without parents. And after looking at all of that, here's what I know. The math was right. If you decided not to have kids, you did the math was right. If you wanted kids but couldn't afford them, the math was right. And if you spent everything you had on IVF and it didn't work, the math was right. The math has always been right. You weren't failing, you were responding rationally to an impossible situation. For the first time in human history, having children became an economic decision instead of a biological one. And for the first time in human history, the economics don't work. Your grandparents didn't have to decide if they could afford kids. They just had them. Your parents didn't run spreadsheets comparing childcare costs to career earning. They figured it out. But you inherited a world where housing costs half of your income before you eat, where childcare costs more than a college degree, and where 2 incomes barely covers the survival. And then someone looked at you and said, why aren't you having kids? Like it was a personal failing. So half of you won't have kids, but that is not a statement about who you are. It is an indictment of what we built. The birth rate isn't failing because people stopped wanting families. It is failing because we made families economically impossible. And instead of fixing that, we are building machines to replace you. By the time you're done watching this video, roughly 4,000 people were born and 6,000 people died. This gap is only increasing, and machines are here to fix it.